This is James, and I'm sitting here with James Spann and Korey Cowart. Korey, if you would take a minute and just tell us how you're doing this week.
Doing pretty good. As most of you know that listen regularly, I work with our Baptist Center up here at North Alabama, and got a lot of stuff going on with it this week. It's been a pretty cool week in youth ministry. We had some good things at our church happen. So really busy week, but very productive and very positive.
Man, that's awesome to hear. Glad everything's going well in Florence, Alabama. And
yes.
Today our guest is going to be James Spann. We're going to talk about children's ministry. James, how are you doing today?
Hello, gentlemen. I'm doing well. I'm going to bring this show right down. I'm going to bring it right down the tubes.
Well,
please.
If you need to listen to our show, Weather Brains, to understand the concept. But
that is definitely going to be one I look up after we get off of here.
The best part of our show, is the pre-show, which we do, here on YouTube on Google. We don't put that on the produced audio podcast. We just sit there and, chat for 15 minutes trying to get our act together. And everybody says that's the best part of this show is the pre-show. So we're thinking about doing a Weather Brains pre-show, which you guys ought to do. Because I thought our pre-show was good.
It was. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Shameless
plug. We talked about everything from iPhone headphones to Florence, Alabama. So
that's
good.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing, I don't know if you guys do this. You need to name all your episodes. We name every episode. Whenever somebody says something totally outrageous, immediately somebody screams show title. That becomes the show title. So, and people listen to see why we named the episode that show title. So, anyway, it's a bizarre show. So the first thing I'm doing is plug in our own show. That's horrible. This is your show. I'll let you take it.
Go for it.
No, you're definitely the one that has the voice for radio and the experience. So we'll let you do that. But if you would, if there's anybody out there that doesn't know who you are, just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us whatever you want us to know about you.
Goodness, I've been on television here since the Civil War. I think the only guy that's been on television longer than me is a guy named Country Boy Eddie, and you guys don't know who this is. He was on television here for 37 years. This is what year is this? 2018. This is number 40 for me. So, but by trade, I'm a television meteorologist, and on the side, I do children's ministry. So that's all you need to know about me. My life is not that interesting, but if you love weather and love children's ministry, it's the best.
Well,
Nice.
I can honestly say I love half of those, and we'll figure out which one that half is later. I'll be real with you. Up until Daniel pointed out to me, the other co-host here on the show, I didn't realize you were in children's ministry. And then whenever he told me, I emailed you, and we kind of set this up. And so just tell us how you ended up in children's ministry.
I had the opportunity to teach a first grade Sunday school class in Plano, Texas in 1984. I was transferred there. I worked for Channel 13 in Birmingham for years, and we were transferred in 84 to Dallas. We moved to Plano, and my wife and I joined First Baptist Church of Plano, and the pastor was a good old boy from Camden, Alabama, and that kind of, that we latched into that, and, they had asked us to serve, and I never thought about it, but I kind of liked it. So my first, toe in the water was at first grade Sunday school class back in 1985 or 84 in Dallas, and I've been doing it ever since. I progressed to children's worship at Hunter Street Baptist Church, which is a large church in Hoover, in 1995. I think that was the year we started doing that. They announced that we're going to start doing children's worship. Now, I've been doing Sunday school classes, but this was worship. I mean, the whole hour and 15 minutes. And at first I thought it was crazy, but after the first service, I'm thinking this is working for me. This is fantastic. So I've been doing children's worship since 1995. And we started a new church plant about 10 years ago. So I left Hunter Street to go to this new church plant in about 2008. So anyway, I'm at Mount Laurel, the church called Double Oak Community Church, and we do 2 hours of worship on Sunday morning. That's my main job, is to be in charge of that. I don't sing in there. I got Mark Phillips to do that, but I do VBS, which is our, that is the most exhausting, the most exhilarating week of the year. In fact, we're already prepping for it now.
Oh yeah. Anybody will tell you VBS is exhausting.
And, and I'll say this, guys, I didn't like church as a young child. I am from a town in rural South Alabama called Greenville. I bet you guys have never heard of Greenville, have you?
Actually, I have.
Wow.
Yes.
And I loved it. I mean, I love Greenville. I am from Butler County. One of my best friends from Cub Scouts is the mayor. If you ever get a speeding ticket in Greenville, call me. But in church, it was just odd. It was an odd time. You guys missed this era. This was the 1960s, and it was pretty rough. I remember in VBS, we made ashtrays for the deacons so they could smoke outside the church. And they would talk about black people in a way that you would not believe. And this was mainstream Christian culture in Alabama back in the 60s. And it was, even as a child, I knew there was something wrong. Remember, there's a bunch of mean-looking men with black suits, and they scowled at kids, and it was just not a good setting. So I've tried my best to flip it so children feel welcome, and we do things that are relevant for them. And I think we've done a fairly good job. We can always be better. Goodness. I mean, I learn something new every week almost, but I want kids to love it and to want to come back and back and back and let the stuff soak in we're teaching them.
All right. Well, I want to ask you two questions, and then Korey's going to jump in there and just ask you some questions strictly about children's ministry. And the two questions I have is the same questions we ask everyone that gets on here. And the first one is just tell us a quick version of how you come to Christ and salvation.
I lived in Greenville, and in second grade, I had one of those life-changing events. My father abandoned me and my mom when I was 7. And it was a case where he just left. And I have no brothers and no sisters, and life got kind of hard. I think my mom was probably making $500 a year as the secretary at Greenville High School. And you can't raise a child on that, even in the 60s. And my mama knew I loved Greenville, and she somehow hung on. I was able to stay through 4th grade, but we moved to 5th grade in Tuscaloosa. She had to go back and finish school so she could get a job teaching. She wound up teaching high school English, and that's how she supported us, which didn't pay much, but it got us through. And but there were some marvelous people that took in 2 strangers. We were 2 strangers in a strange land. Let me tell you what, Tuscaloosa, Alabama looked like New York City to me when you're from Greenville. And there were some just great people, and because of those people, the people working children's ministry, my mom, and I made the decision to accept Christ when I was 12 years old in 1968. And you can do the math. I don't know how old I am, but so I was 12 years old. And, I think the one thing I missed, the thing I never thought about is why was I left here? I could have been taken to heaven on a chariot of fire like you two guys, but he chose to leave us here. And I never thought about that. And I think that I regret that. And I really didn't catch on to being God sent until I was probably in my 30s. But anyway, I was 12 years old, so 1968.
Okay. All right. Now, the second question is it's a little different, and is how would you define an everyday minister?
Well, look, it's like some people would come into the church. I remember at Hunter Street, and they'd say, "This is a big old church. How many ministers do you have here?" And I said, "We got about 8,000," and they'd look at you like you're crazy. But every Christian is a minister, period. That's it. I mean, that's everyday ministry. The pastors and those in the church staff, they equip us to go out and do the work. And we are left here to help other people. And ministry is the fancy church word for that. And that is when life gets good, realizing, number one, that we were left here to help other people. Number two, find a place where you can plug in and serve using your gifts. And you guys have different gifts than I do. And I have different gifts than you do, and we plug into those places where we're gifted to serve, and life gets really good. That's when it's good. The ones that are miserable and bitter and cynical, they're the ones that are just looking after themselves. And there's a season where being selfish is okay, but it doesn't work out in the long run.
Right. We have a lot of different types of ministers that listen to our podcast and whatnot, and obviously with you being in children's ministry, we'd like you to shed some light on that. So. Just a few questions. If you could narrow it down to just a few things for those that are prospective, possibly children's ministers in the future, what do you think some important things are to remember going into children's ministry or working with children, period?
Well, first off, this is not 1955, 1985, and this is not 2005. This is 2018.
Right.
And you got to reach kids where they are. I have seen way too many churches coming in doing it like they did in 1955. Hello, friends. I've got a flannel board here, and we're going to do some work on the flannel board. That's going to make them, they won't come back.
Yeah.
No. Who are these people? I mean, and a lot of adults say, well, that's the way it should be. Well, it doesn't matter what you think the way it is. It is what culture is, what it is, and you have to reach them where they are. That's exactly what Jesus did. And if you look at the ones that insulted Christ more than anybody else, it was the Southern Baptists of the day, the religious big shots of the day. These, and I won't even go down that path, but we have to reach them where they are. So to do a children's worship properly, and again, for some churches that are small, they don't have the resources to do that. And that's fine. They bring the kids down during the big worship and the pastor teaches them for 3 minutes or something. That's fine. But if you really want to get them plugged in, you get them off in their own worship center, whether that's just a Sunday school room or something, just some separate space, and do stuff that's relevant for them. They will want to come back. And let me tell you something. The Bible says that God is looking for those that worship in spirit and truth. And when you get those kids plugged in and they're singing, that's what you've got. And occasionally in the summer, and that we take off July, I'll fill in some churches and I'll look out over the adults. They're thinking about they're going to eat roast beef or chicken for lunch. They checked out. They are totally checked out. But if you come into our children's worship, when you see them singing, they are plugged in and focusing on the Lord and what he's done for them. It is the sweetest thing you'll ever see. And typically I teach. That's my main role in there. I'm the teacher guy. So we do praise and worship, we teach, but understand we also have some fun. And by golly, the way we have fun, I've got a former NFL football player in there, and he is great with those kids. He brings them up, does a little show with them, gives them a blow pop, and I'll send you guys a link to some of the services we do, but it's just different. And I'm sure there's some Baptist preacher rolling over in his grave because there might be a child dancing or raising their hands or something. But goodness gracious, guys, they need to feel welcome and wanted. There are so many hurting kids. You've got hurting kids in both y'all's churches. We've got them in mind. And we've got a lot of issues in our families in this state, and we have to be able to reach them. And oftentimes the way to reach them is through the kids. And if the kids want to come back, by golly, the rest of the family will also often come back.
Right. And I mean, that's important for any area of ministry. A lot of times we try to backtrack. And like you said, people will say, well, what's worked before? And what's worked before didn't always work now. And, I think that's important for a lot of our listeners to hear.
Right. And the other thing, too, the culture in y'all's communities might be different than mine. Exactly. You have to, you cannot minister to people. And I say this to professional meteorologists. You can't serve them in weather unless you understand the culture, the people, and the geography. When it comes to ministry, you have to understand the culture and the people. And what might work in Florence and what might work in Fayette or what might work in Vernon or what might work in Mount Laurel might be a little different. And that's something you have to ascertain. Mm-hmm. And that's why the other thing I think is important to do, it's for you to get out and hang out with the people that you serve. I am in a school lunchroom literally every day. Now, I do science programs in schools. So I'm kind of wearing two hats. I'm doing, the weather thing. But at the same time, I hang out with those kids and I get to see them and talk with them. And I'm just there to get to know them. And by getting to know them, you get an idea for what they like, what they don't like. And it really helps you. For people in adult ministry, I challenge them all the time to do this. Go hang out at a Dollar General. I triple dog dare you to go hang out at a Dollar General. And those are the real people that you serve. When I get summer interns here, these are brilliant young scientists that are majoring in meteorology, which is a hard science with very deep, math. We're solving fluid motion problems here. The first thing I do, I take them to the Walmart in Adamsville, which represents the best cross-section of people that watch television. And most of these folks don't live where the kids live. They don't look like them. But if you can't relate to the people in that Walmart, you won't be successful on television.
Right.
And it's the same thing for children's ministry. If you can't relate to a bunch of third graders in a school lunchroom, you got no hope. And walking into a school lunchroom with a dark suit and a dark tie, scowling at kids with 8 layers of hair, that ain't going to work. They're going to be freaked out. We teach our kids, when you see some creeper like that, run. You come in there, where there's no barriers. And the suit thing, because I hated those guys in suits so much when I was a kid. I probably overdo it, but I wear cargo shorts and T-shirts when I'm at church to break down that barrier. I don't want that barrier to be there for these guys. But they need to know that we understand them. They understand us. We speak their language. We have fun. We know what they like. And, we teach and praise in a way that's relevant to them. And I'm afraid a lot of adults that try and do children's ministry, they have no idea what they're doing. So I see some of these VBSs church put on, it makes my head want to blow up. And again, they're nice people, but their gift is not children's ministry. And if you're not gifted to serve in children's ministry, please don't serve. I'm not gifted to teach adults. I guarantee if I had to teach adults, the people in that class would rather stick needles in their eyes than to hear me, because that's not what I do.
Yeah.
So just, if you're going to do children's ministry, be sure you're called to do it. And by going, if you hang out in a school lunchroom and enjoy it, there's a good chance you're called to do it.
Nice. What would you encourage people on how to, this may be people doing children's ministry, like I said, maybe perspective, may just be a church, somebody from a church listening. How would you encourage them on discipling children, teaching them, the basics, things like that?
Well, here's the deal, guy. We get them typically once a week, maybe twice a week if you're lucky. They might come on Wednesday, but we get them twice a week. The key is training the parents, because they've got them all the time. That's where the true discipleship is going to take place. And I understand we've got problems in this state with families. We have a lot of issues. One of the biggest problems where I minister, it's heroin. And if you don't think it's where you live, then you're blind. It's everywhere in this state. Yep. The opioid crisis is widespread. We have husbands and fathers that are addicted to internet pornography. And this stuff is hard to talk about, but this stuff is disrupting our families in great ways. So in some cases, the parents just don't provide discipleship. So you've got them, and you've got them for 1 hour on Sunday and maybe 1 hour on Wednesday, and that's it. So what we do is do real life applications on Sunday morning. I will often tell real life stories about situations I've encountered and how I handle it. And these are hard situations. Our kids are dealing with hard things, guys. These fourth and fifth graders, that's preteen ministry. But let me tell you what, fourth and fifth graders are basically encountering stuff used to be 10th and 11th graders used to encounter. And you need to understand that. And you give them situations, and you go through a biblical way of handling that. Biblical conflict resolution is huge. So many churches feel like they have to go by these curriculum, if they're doing Lifeway or group or whatever. Look, you don't have to. In the Bible, it says you shall use Lifeway for the entire year. It doesn't say that. If you need to break out of that canned curriculum you've got and do something for your kids, do something for your kids. If you need to do a whole service, it's a prayer session, do a whole, let the Holy Spirit lead you. And real world examples. And again, the Wednesday night is where the really good stuff happens. And I can't come Wednesday night because I work television. I work nights here, but they do some really good stuff on Wednesday night. But again, it's meeting those kids where they are in real life situations where they face. And again, I can't stress enough, this is not 1975. This is not 1985. This is 2018. We've had a number over the years of fifth graders addicted to heroin. We've had a number of fourth and fifth graders that have seen parents murdered. We have a number of kids that have poverty in their home that is so severe that they wind up hospitalized because of malnutrition. And guys, this is not some inner city setting. This is where you live and where I live. And we've got to meet them there too.
That's good. I think one of the really big things is, even with children, I know with youth, I struggled with this when I first got into it 6 years ago. Like you said, I didn't realize a lot of the stuff that teenagers deal with, same avenue. A lot of people don't realize the stuff that kids are dealing with. And I mean, you'd never think kids are dealing with heroin and things like that you talked about. And so really important, if you're listening out there, to keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, just kind of understand what could possibly be going on. I don't know what grades you guys begin at with your children's ministry. 5th, 6th grade. Is that about the time that the oldest that they can stay in?
In my children's worship, I have grades K through 5.
Okay.
And
so you guys stop at 5.
During the two services, the first service is K1 and 2. And the second service is 3, 4, and 5, because it's hard for a fifth grader to have the same worship experience as a kindergarten kid.
Mm-hmm. That was what I was going to get into, was how you maybe divide it up and whatnot.
Right. Here's what I'd like to.
Ones.
By the way, Korey, is that your real hair? Wow. I had hair like that, James, I'd be a good looking guy. Wow.
Thanks.
I mean, that's just like awesome. I'm just overwhelmed, intimidated.
I hope all our listeners hear that, because I get a lot of rag about my hair. So there you go. James Spann.
Now you guys post this on YouTube too, don't you? I mean, instead of just doing the audio.
It does not go on YouTube.
We just do the audio.
Oh no.
They'll just have to look me up if they want to see my luscious locks.
No, there will be a picture of this conversation that goes online, so they can see his hair then.
Yeah, Korey could do the Justin Bieber hair flip if he wanted to. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
No, here's the ideal thing to do in terms of grouping. In my opinion, if we had a really, and we are kind of a big church now, I like the idea of putting 5th and 6th grade aside and have their own group, their own worship, their own thing. That's preteen ministry. And quite frankly, I'd almost be tempted to do 4th, 5th, and 6th, because 4th grade boys are like 6th grade boys used to be. And then I would have K 1, 2, and 3, on their own. But in our church, and in most churches, it's not big enough and not practical to do that. We did that at Hunter Street. We called it Route 56, and that was the preteen ministry. And that's where you could talk to them about some pretty serious subjects that you don't want to hear, a first grader to hear. But again, for us, we do K 1 and 2 in one service, and then 3, 4, and 5 in the other, which works out pretty well. I really think the last grade of innocence is 2nd grade. And some people might disagree with me, but hey, I'm in a school every single day. I've raised 2 boys. I do children's ministry. I'm with them all the time. And the stuff you hear 3rd grade boys talking about will blow your pea-picking mind. And so I think they deserve to be up there with that older group. So 3, 4, and 5, and then in one service, and K 1 and 2 in the other. And, you can do in the K 1 and 2, you can do a little bit of puppet stuff and some lighter stuff. But even there, these kids are so used to doodads and iPads and pods and phones and all this other stuff. You have to use a lot of video and a lot of cutting edge kind of stuff, even down there at that young age. A lot of these kindergarten kids, they've grown up watching baby TV and, Nickelodeon and SpongeBob, and they're used to these video elements. And if they just see somebody standing up there talking without something going on, that's not working. So, both those services are very action-packed with a lot of video elements and fast-paced changes, and not really long sermons.
Okay. You've kind of alluded to this already a little bit, but how do you guys manage your volunteers? You said you have like a guy from the NFL come, and I'm sure you have other parents that work within it, but what's like kind of the, I guess, blueprint or the plan you guys have with your volunteers?
Right. And let me just say, that when we started this church plan, I walked away from a church with 500 kids, 500, and certain these ones that show up every Sunday with 2 services. And at the first Sunday at the new church plant, we were in a school gym, and I had 17 kids, and I cried. I put my head down on the wall, and I just cried. I thought I have screwed up. I have left my kids, my family over there to come to this. I didn't think I connected with them. I didn't think they understood me. I didn't understand them. But that's when people started showing up, and that's when you're doing the right thing. And you've got to find the right people to be in children's worship. You just cannot take Joe Q Public that volunteers out of the church pew, because nothing personal, guys, but most adults suck at children's ministry. They're horrible at it. I agree. They don't know. They don't know what to do with it. They think it's too loud. They have no idea what to do. I've got to have called children's ministry people in there. So first guy that showed up was Matt Allen. Matt played for the New York Giants, played for the Troy Trojans. He's from Montgomery, big old tall guy. And he was just like my Elvis. I mean, he came in there and boom, immediate connection. And then Mark Phillips. I mean, I'm a Mark Phillips fanboy. He had a band here called Hotel, one of the most talented musicians. He could lead children's worship at any mega church in the country, or any worship. And he showed up. And what's funny, most of them were men, which makes no sense, because most children's ministries, it's all women. And, we needed some women, and sure enough, some women showed up. You need some teachers that have that sweet feminine voice that they need. You need a mix. And so you want to have that good mix of teachers and, mix it up with all the different kind of elements in there. One of the sets that Mark does every week, Mark Phillips, is What God Taught Me This Week. Real life, real world experiences that he can relate to with those kids. It's marvelous. I sit there and I am so locked into that. It's awesome. And then We'll have Matt doing his game show, and then we do praise and worship, and then we have, and we'll drop some videos and we teach. So the main thing, you just got to look for people that are called to work in children's ministry, and they will be sent. If you believe everything that we say about the Lord, he will provide for our needs. He will provide the right people for any children's ministry, even in a small church.
So you've basically encouraged the whole time and whatnot for prospective children's ministers. Is there any advice that you just kind of closing out this portion of the podcast that you would just kind of last minute advice you'd like to throw out there for anybody thinking about, anybody currently in, anything of that sort?
Well, it's very important. And every church has an emphasis. I've seen some churches and their thing is foreign missions. And I've seen some churches and their thing is, praise and worship and all this. But I think every church should consider children's ministry to be important. And I know that every ministry wants to be considered important.
Right.
But this is where the foundation comes from. This is your next generation. This is your next generation. This is their foundation. And quite frankly, we have the easiest job in the world. They have a tender heart, and you can reach them very easily. We share the gospel, and I think that's part of what we should be doing in children's worship. We share it typically 4 times a year, and then during VBS, give the chance to an opportunity to accept Christ. And you know how it is with kids. I could bring them all down front if I wanted to, through emotional connection. I make them look me in the eyes when I share the gospel, and they will not look you in the eyes if they don't mean it. But, consider putting some resources in there. And listen, you don't have to pay Lifeway or Group or any of these big companies all this money. You can do your own curriculum. But just, again, the key thing to remember is the message is the same that was shared in 1955. You're just doing it in a different way. And you might have to do some fast-paced video stuff. And a very important thing to do is to let those kids see you. We do School of the Month. School of the Month. We draw a school, and if we pick a school, the whole children's ministry team goes out and eats lunch with our kids over there. And they love it. The schools welcome us to do that. They are glad we are there because they know we're not there evangelizing. We're just there developing relationships. That's all we're doing. And let them see you in a real-world setting. And the best way to do that, it is a school lunchroom. I cannot stress that enough.
I agree.
So many kids will see you in a lunchroom and they'll ask the other kids, who was that guy? Was that your dad or somebody? Or was that James Spann? And they say, yeah, he does the children's stuff at our church. And they show up. And before you know it, you've got more and more and more and more coming. And it's a function of that outreach through hanging out in the lunchroom. And I know one-on-one visits, that's fine. That's great. But you can knock out a whole bunch of kids at one time in a school lunchroom. And if you need to break a rule sometimes, by golly, break a rule. I'll send you guys some links, and you can see some of the stuff we do to break Baptist rules or Methodist rules or Episcopal rules or whatever they are. I'm a Bible guy. I think our church is Southern Baptist. I should know this. I was the chairman of the deacons at Hunter Street. Chairman of the deacons. I was up in the circle of trust, the upper echelon. But when I went to this new church plan, I said, guys, I'd like to request that I not be a deacon, elder, personnel, finance. I don't want to be any of that. All I want to do is children's ministry, and they've honored that. And I know those are important jobs, but I just felt like I needed to concentrate on this. So, it's very important. Every church needs to be doing it, and they need to be doing it right. That's relevant to the kids. And if you do VBS, do it right. Do the best you can do. I mean, make it energetic,
Absolutely.
Exciting. If it is boring, and here's the last thing I'll say, guys, if a children's worship or VBS is boring, I mean boring, they will never come back. And if you're teaching if you're sharing the gospel, teaching from God's word, it should never, ever, ever, ever be boring. And I've seen so many churches where they have these adult volunteers, and it's like they don't even want to be there. And they're just going through the motions, and it sounds like they're half asleep. It's just, guys, this is just, if you can't do it right, it's best not to do it, because if kids see you bored with this, they won't have anything to do with church. Make VBS a big deal. I mean, pump up the energy, and and ask God to send the right resources, and He will.
All right, man. I love that advice. Really thinking about the idea of don't put the wrong people into a role. I've been a part of a few churches in my past where, especially when it comes to children's Sunday school classes, if they couldn't get a volunteer for that class, they would just kind of pick somebody at random and just throw them in there.
Yep.
And
pulling teeth.
Yeah. I think that would be the worst thing to do. But we're at the part of the podcast where we're getting to the end, and we end it always with a plug of the week. We'll start with you, James. Do you have any plugs for the listeners? It could be podcast, music, whatever.
Pick of the week. Weather. No, I'm not going to say weather.
That one's going to be on there, though.
Wrong show.
Yeah, wrong show. No, we do picks of the week at the end of the show on Weather Brains too. I would say our children's video page, and I'll send you guys a link. And you can see all the children's worship services we do. And I really, though, want you to go look at the VBS videos. We start shooting VBS videos now. We're going to start later this month. This year, we're doing Shipwreck, which is a group theme. We're going to take it and make it a Gilligan's Island thing. And the kids don't even know who that is. They're going to think we're brilliant writers. But we're going to shoot on Lake Martin, on an island out there, and we roll it into our own. We do question of the day. It's hard to explain in a short setting, but my pick of the week, it's going to be the Double Oak Vimeo page with all the videos on there. And be sure and go down and see the Double Oak Vacation Bible School from any year. Last year was pretty fun. And I guarantee you the decibel level in that worship center is so loud, you couldn't handle it. I'll come in there screaming at the end of those videos, throwing out dollar store junk. But they think it's $10 million bills, and so just watch. If you get a minute, watch those videos. I'm not saying it's perfect; it is not perfect. It is far from perfect, but it's working for us, and you might be able to get some good ideas from that.
Nice.
All right. So the only question I have in response to that is: are you going to be playing Gilligan?
No, I'm the professor. I'm the professor.
You're the professor.
I'm the professor. Oh. I'm going to be the pointy-headed guy that's got all the science answers. We have to let the pastor of the church be the skipper this time. Now, the pastor, he is skinny as a rail, and the skipper on that show was big. But the kids don't know. See, they don't really know.
Yeah, they don't know.
So they have no idea. And we've got some female youth pastors that are female that look like Marianne and Ginger, and we got the high school pastor guy. All you youth pastors are just goofy. I love it, man. You guys get it.
Yes.
And he's going to be Gilligan because he's got the look. So yeah, and we'll start shooting that, and every day there'll be a new episode, and we do question of the day. We'll come in with a question, and we'll shoot it the day of, so they'll see the kids need to see themselves on the big screens at VBS, and that's how we do that. But anyway, I'll send you guys a link, and y'all can put it up in the show notes.
Awesome. Korey, do you got any plugs of the week?
I do not have any for this week.
All right. Well, I see you come prepared, but that's all right.
Well, wait a minute. When you don't have a pick on our show, you get this. You get the fog.
I guess that's me.
That is perfect.
If I say the Bible, does that get me out, or is that like the?
No, you get the.
John 3:16. No. Yeah. Francis Chan wrote a really good children's book. So can't remember what it's called, but it was good.
Talking about his children's book, like the one that's like a picture book.
Yeah, what's it called? Me and you looked at it that one time. I can't remember what
Big
it's called.
Red Tractor or something like that.
Big Red Tractor, yes. I kept wanting to say something about the bull, but I'm thinking about Ferdinand the Bull. So, yeah.
All right, well, I have one.
Go pick him up.
I have one called Gospel Centered Kids Ministry. Read it and then gave it to a kids pastor I know. Fantastic study. Real good, simple read. Does not take long. I would recommend that out there. And then I think even though he gave a few plugs of himself, I'm going to recommend that we go and listen to Weather Brains podcast.
Weather Brains.
I've already subscribed. As you were talking, I've subscribed. I'm going to listen to last week's episode tomorrow, so we're good to go. So listeners, I would encourage you to do that as well. And so, but as we get off of here, is there anything you want to add?
No, I'm good. I got to go to work. That's the problem I have. It's
fun.
I got to go see what the weather's going to do.
All right. Well, real quick, tell us how we can find you on social media.
On the Twitter, my last name Spann. If you don't follow me, you'll hurt my feelings. But wait a minute, I don't have any feelings left. When you do weather, you have no feelings. It's my last name Spann. Snapchat, it's Spann WX. On Instagram, it's Spann Pix, Pix. And on the face bag, it's facebook.com/James Spann.
All right, that's awesome. Well, listeners, go out there, follow him, especially if you live in Alabama. I promise you there will not be any more detailed meteorologists out there than James Spann.
Nope.
Pretty sure he zoomed into my house one time and circled it, but probably not. But, Korey, you got anything to add before we get off here?
I do not.
All right. Well, guys, I've enjoyed the podcast. Thank you again, James, for being on here.
James.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great week. Enjoyed it.
You too. And this has
Man,
been
you
the
too.
Everyday Ministry Podcast, and we're a podcast where everyday ministers get together to discuss ministry.